So my talk is about leveraging Gradle and Grails 3. So about me, I've been a Grails core contributor since 2009, and I had the nice opportunity to work at Pivotal for year 2014 until March 2015 in the Groovy and Grails team. And I really liked that experience. Now I'm working at Gradle, developing Gradle core as my full-time job. So it's a big change, but the similar parts of it is that I'm mainly working with open source and doing open source contributions and working in that way. I'm currently living in Ontario, Canada, where I moved in the beginning of January from Finland.
So you like the cold to the cold.
Yeah.
You want to keep it consistent.
Yeah, I was born in Canada, but as a child I moved to Finland. So I want my 3 boys to learn English and culture and get friends in Canada. So some background of the subject here. Grails has been an early adapter of Gradle. Grails core has been built with Gradle since 2008, so it's a very early adopter. But the difference that has quite recently happened is that Grails 3 bundles Gradle for the building system of Grails applications, and Grails 3 went GA in March. So that's the difference here that we're mainly talking about. But we'll also look about that how it has benefited Grails core development, like Gradle itself. Grails is a full stack framework with an integrated build solution. In previous versions of Grails, the solution was a custom solution that was built upon different parts. And the main part was Gantt for build scripts. Gantt is based on Ant and provides kind of a groovy way of working with Ant builds. And then the dependency resolution and management was solved by Ivy in the beginning, and then later on in Grails 2.3 there came Ether, which is the library of Maven dependency resolution. It can be reused on its own. But in Grails 3, Gradle is the integrated build solution for Grails 3 applications. So why did we want to choose Gradle for Grails applications? Gradle was a perfect fit with its plugin system and tooling API. And after this switch, Grails users could use all the Gradle features and benefit from the Gradle ecosystem. And also, main point was to get rid of the burden of maintaining and developing a custom build system in Gradle, in Grails core. So that's a big issue, like to be maintaining and fixing problems and bugs with a small development team. So now there's no such parts that have to be taken care of. So about Grails 3, a few headlines about that. It's based on Spring Boot. So all Grails 3 applications, there are also Spring Boot applications. And at the same time, we got rid of some of the legacy baggage in Grails, and we wanted to still keep the backwards compatibility, so it's fairly easy to port Grails apps to Grails 3. And a large part of the work was splitting Grails into smaller modules with minimal amount of dependencies. And one of the themes was to remove the compulsory dependency of the servlet API. So in this modularization process, Gradle multi-project build features, they helped a lot. And this work had already started about 2 years ago, long before Grails 3 release. So I picked up some numbers from the number of sub-projects in Grails 2.3. It was 35, and in Grails 3 there's 54 sub-projects. So one of the main reasons of the growth is this picture here shows that when we split, for example, Grails Web, it split it up into several smaller pieces which have the minimal set of dependencies. So the benefit of this is that when you don't, for example, use GSPs or JSPs, you don't have to include the transitive dependencies that those dependencies pull in. So then a little bit of Grails plugins, because this in some ways relates to how we used Gradle in Grails 3. As some background information, most framework features in Grails, they're provided as Grails plugins that are either in the Grails core itself, or they're available in as public plugins, or then users could make their own plugins in their own applications. And the Grails framework has multiple extension points for the plugins. And what this I'm trying to explain here is that in previous Grails versions, the different areas were kind of all, you were with one plugin, you'd be able to add features into all areas. And when we moved to Gradle, we had to make a change here so that we kind of separated that the build time, that this is the area that it's Gradle only, so that we won't be touching this area. And this model helped us separate things in the plugins, and then find out ways how to kind of provide ways so that plugins could contribute in the code generation area. And also, like, the basic features of plugins, of course, are that they, at the application runtime, they provide some features. But then we also identified that there's some plugins that kind of run inside and running application at development time. For example, the database migrations plugin, it has to be able to connect to the database and find out the domain objects, like all that information. And the only way is to kind of have it running inside an application. So in these all these areas, there's solutions that are compatible with the change that we moved to Gradle. So I tried to make some kind of picture of how the Gradle or Grails development time tooling works out. So there's a Grails shell script, which is kind of the entry point to all this. And this is about like how it's happening in Grails 3. So then we have just a plain Grails CLI Java main application, which has all the dependencies are basically as files in the Grails home directory, and that has been built with Gradle's application plugin. So it's basically generated with that application plugin, the shell script, and then the configuration to start up the Grails CLI. And then this CLI, it hooks to the Gradle tooling API to the build file, and from there on it's it's able to call Gradle tasks, and then it also uses the tooling API features to get basically the class path of the application, because there are some plugins that contribute to the code generation and then the command runtime. So then by getting the class path, it'll just scan the class path for the templates what are in this area, which are included in plugins. But the main source for the different code generation templates, they are basically a Git repository, which is cloned in the background into .grails/repository directory using Git client, which is a Java library. So it's a relatively simple application which provides the similar user experience that the previous Grails versions had. So I'll show a demo soon about it. So the Grails profiles concept is it's for creating new Grails applications. There's skeletons for the new projects, and then there's templates for new artifacts. For example, a web profile could provide a controller template, which can be used then in the interactive console. So if we take a look at it, so I myself use GVM for installing Grails, and if someone wants to try this, once they have GVM installed, they could do GVM install Grails, and then after that they'll basically get it installed. And after it's there, I just executed the Grails command without any parameters, and it lists the available commands when you're not on a project. So there you'll have a create app command, and then you could specify the different profiles, or then for creating plugins there's a create plugin command. So now just to show this a little bit, we'll create a small Grails application and take a look at the contents and how this relates to Gradle. So now we get a response that the application has been created, and now let's go into the application directory and take a look at the files. Actually, I'll open it in the editor. How visible is that? It's not really. Let's take a look at this shell. So there's going to be basically the typical Grails directories. Then there's a Gradle directory with the Gradle wrapper. So the skeleton for the profiles, they contain the files for the Gradle wrapper. And then there's source directories also.
Can you scroll back down?
Okay.
Is the Spring directory still a source folder? Like when we get pulled into Eclipse, conf and Spring would both be source folders, and you'd have to exclude the Spring from that. Is that still the case in Grails 3?
No, since in Grails 3, this conf directory, it's not anymore a source directory. That's one change in Grails 3. For different settings or files, for example, Bootstrap, you now have to put it into the init directory because of that change, because it's not anymore a source directory. So Bootstrap lives now in the Grails app init directory. So that just happens to solve that problem at the same time. So I'll open up the build file, which gets created from the Grails profile. So it'll add the required plugins in the repositories where the plugins are available, so that you have a working Gradle build for a basic project. So here you can see that it's applying also the Spring Boot plugin, and there's for Grails web applications, there's 2 different plugins here: Grails Web Gradle plugin and Grails GSP plugin. So the GSP plugin will add tasks for compiling the GSP views. So now with this build, we were able to use Gradle to run the build. And here there was the assets compiler was doing asset compilation. That's included in Grails 3.2. There's a assets plugin which is also compatible with this Gradle solution here. And then I'll show in the Grails interactive console that it also has similar functionality there, so that you could start the application with the good old run app command, and it'll actually use Gradle to do that. So it's Yeah.
Are they ever going to make that go back to the prompt? I mean, you can't do anything, and the prompt's now locked up until you shut down.
Yeah, there's going to be changes there since.
I mean, the docs even say once that's done, it'll go back and you can type shut and stop command and all the tests. You just can't do anything now.
Yeah, that's a bit problematic. It's there's going to be a feature sometime in the upcoming versions of Gradle that there's a way to kind of have Gradle fork a test server on the background, and then there's gonna
That's the way it used to work.
yeah. But since we're using Gradle here, it would be possible to kind of fork that Gradle process on the background, but then there's different problems than in that. So there's going to be a Gradle feature at some point of time which could be used here to handle that in a nicer way. That's actually used already in Gradle's Play support to make the Play development server run in the background while the continuous build is running. So now we have the Grails application running there. And here's another example of a certain integration that when you hit Control-C, you see that it's stopping the build. It's actually in the background, it's capturing Control-C, and when you hit Control-C, it'll use tooling API's cancellation token feature to cancel the running build, because the boot run task is actually a task in a build, so the build just keeps running and blocking. So it's kind of awkward currently how it is. But that's gonna change sometime in the future. So the Gradle tooling API, that's what was used here to embed Gradle in Grails, the CLI. So it's a pretty simple API for connecting to a Gradle build, and the client part of the tooling API, it'll take care of launching the Gradle daemon, which it will connect to. So it's possible to get detailed information about build models, and you could even provide your own models that kind of get returned to your client side part of it. So you could have some logic within a Gradle plugin that does something, and then it returns to the client side some kind of result. And in this case, we're basically using this feature for returning the class path, so that the Grails CLI could then scan the class path for different plugin, the code gen templates and commands, because it's not using the class path for anything else. Since it's using Gradle for everything else. And there's in the Gradle user guide, there's a chapter about the tooling API and embedding Gradle. So it contains some information about the tooling API. When we started using the tooling API for the integration, we first noticed that it wasn't suited for our purpose, because the output, which normally shows up like this, that you get get the color-coded output, and then it's it's not just appending to the output, that it's replacing the lines, the ANSI color-coded output thing. Let's see if I remember how to. Was it something like this, or no? I'll try to find a way if to show how it looked like in the beginning. Yeah, it's dumb. Oh, it didn't like that. So now let's see if we can demonstrate what it looked like. I'll try once more with a clean build so that there's more output. It doesn't look so bad right now, but when it's resolving dependencies and downloading things, it's the output is pretty ugly compared to the ANSI output. So this feature wasn't available in the tooling API when we started working on this, and that was my first contribution to Gradle to get that a pull request made for that, and which was later on came as part of Gradle 2.3, so that we get the color-coded output. So let's go to the questions. Anything in your mind about Gradle and Grails?
Have you used any of the REST API doc plugins with Grails 3? Because I know it works in 2.4, but I haven't seen anything where it works. It works.
The default scaffolding is an extends REST template, or REST controller. So all the REST capabilities.
So I'm not sure if you asked about the core plugins or features which are available for REST or a certain custom plugin, but in Grails 3 the old plugins aren't compatible. So there's currently a small set of plugins that are Grails 3 compatible, but it's growing all the time since the community is adding more and more plugins. So that's a change, but all the basic features around like REST controllers, which were available in previous Grails versions, they behave in the same way in Grails 3.
There's a micro profile too that'll do that, but it's so micro. I mean, have you used the micro profile?
I haven't tried that.
Oh my goodness. I mean, you wind up using it and you get like 2 classes and it's almost nothing else, and it works except there's almost no documentation to tell you where to go from there. So, I mean, I've run it and it does build a trivial little RESTful web services even smaller than Ratpack, but I don't know how to move on.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, it's just a comment. It is great that you guys picked Gradle because, you know, for at Mutual Omaha, for our build pipeline, know, for creating a Jenkins pipeline for our Java apps, we just dropped that code right in the Grails 3.0 build.gradle, and it just works, you know, and we wouldn't have been able to do that, you know, obviously we were still using Gantt. So it seems to work great and play well with other plugins.
But the best part is how fast code generation is, man. You say create domain class, by the time you hit enter, it's done. Unbelievable.
Thanks.